Okay, hi, I'm Renee Hobbs. Welcome to EDC 534, week 11 of the spring 2017 semester. I'm here with the amazing students enrolled in the, what are we calling this? The Graduate Certificate Program in Digital Literacy. This week is Synthesis Week, so we really forced you into a situation of having to do synthesis by writing a multimedia reflective essay. And if you're like me, sometimes I have to be dragged kicking and screaming into synthesis because I'm such a hoover. You know, I want to hoover up all this stuff, and then I don't want to always take time to do the synthesis, right? Sometimes I delay doing the synthesis, but usually that's where all the good ideas come from. And in a way, that's partly why I love deadline pressure so much. And you guys have had a lot of it with this class this semester, right? Because deadline pressure sort of forces you to a situation of finding synthesis. So let me share my screen with you, and well, before I do that, hold on. I can't do that quite yet. Before I do that, I have to actually get the class website going. And let's take a little bit of time to talk about what your experience with synthesis has been like. First I thought what we could do is watch a short 2-minute video about synthesis, just so that we are all on the same page when we're using this term, right? Okay, so what we're gonna do, and let me just kind of state this really clearly. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to watch this video. If you click on the link there at the top, it's What is Synthesis? I think it's just 2 or 3 minutes long. We're going to watch it. We're going to see what we think of the definition of synthesis that's provided, and then we're going to see if we can make some connections to our own experience this week with the reflective thinking we're doing about digital authorship. Give me a thumbs up if you understand what we're doing now. We're watching the video, then we're going to come back and talk about it. Okay, so you got that, Donna? You just arrived. A whole bunch of people just arrived, and I'm like, do you guys know what we're doing? Who can state back in your own words what we're doing? I may just doing a comprehension check here, right? Just like with the little ones. What are we doing now? Olivia?
We're watching the synthesis video and looking at the definition and then relating it to our reflective essays that we wrote.
Cool. So we're going to watch, and then we'll come back and have a conversation. You can put your microphone on mute while you watch. Okay, so when you have finished watching that video, why don't you give me a thumbs up? All right, cool. All right, so we're talking a little bit about synthesis in relation to what your experience has been like moving into this phase of the reflective essay. And I'm also curious about, you know, this 2-minute video. This video really, you know, this video really has a very simple and elegant definition of synthesis. How does it match with your own experience, and what aspects of synthesis might it be oversimplifying or leaving out? Who wants to go first? So we're talking about our experience with synthesis this week and in this class, and what you think of this definition of synthesis. Again.
Yes. Synthesis is the combine information and create something new information according to what you have get from the information you get, also from your experience. So basically, it should be create something new. That is I think that is the main thing. But I lack that creative, skills. So I'm working on it.
What do you mean you're working on it?
I'm working on creating something new from what I read.
This is a good observation, Hong-Yan. The video make it sound like that happens like easily or naturally.
It's not.
I agree.
Thank you for sharing. Other perspectives on this topic of synthesis.
I agree with Hong-Yan on that. Is this one was difficult, and I'm still in the process. It'll be there by midnight, I promise. But it's one of those where you start to look at, we've had so much information, and then I even started looking back at the other courses along with, and even back into the summer, the institute, and pulling that all together, and just kind of started. It was kind of like when you go to the grocery store and you don't know what you're going to have for dinner, and you just kind of go up and down the aisles, and you just kind of start going, okay, I might pick some of this, I might pick some of that, and then like voila, you go, okay, I'll do this, and it kind of hits you. And I think I had kind of one of those moments, and I'm pulling it together, and it's starting to make sense to me, and hopefully my synthesis comes across as sensical to the rest. But I get that difficulty part of it. It was tough.
I really appreciate the metaphor of the grocery store idea. And what I like about that metaphor is that when you go to the grocery store and you pick out things, because that's kind of what you're doing as you're synthesizing for this class, you're picking out some things to put together, and you're not picking everything because that's possible, right? There was too much. But it is interesting about how that active choice at the grocery store, you are choosing, and you're choosing actively, and you are also omitting actively. You're passing the cookie aisle, and a single package of cookies.
Even though you want to.
Right? Even though you want to, right? You're saying, for now, we're not going to deal with cookies or dessert or any of that shit.
Yeah, yeah.
So I do feel like that a big part of synthesis is actually omitting stuff, right?
True.
Because, like you said, otherwise your cart is full of junk and you still can't make dinner.
Right. You got to hone it in eventually.
Other perspectives on what the experience of synthesis is like for you, how you experience it, what you liked about the way it was framed with that video, and how you're understanding this competence that's being activated by the reflective essay. Dan.
Well, one of the things about synthesis that I find is a recurring theme for me in my professional life is being the teacher who might want to go a little bit too far in terms of content, and sometimes be tempted to go over the students' heads. And so that what Mary was talking about and what you just had said, to me, it's like I know how to help someone else augment maybe what they haven't thought about yet, and they have a good job of helping me filter out which I should have left out.
Yeah. You know, of course, Dan, I can really relate to that, because I love complexity. right? And I've kind of created this class to reflect a complexity of thinking about digital authorship that is where I'm at. But it's really true that the issue of how you figure out what's the appropriate level of complexity, and one that also lets you connect to both your own life experience and your presumed reader or listener or viewer or student, really an interesting challenge. So one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to talk more about synthesis and get you to think about the relationship between the synthesis that you're doing for the multimedia essay and your final project. And at the same time, I thought it would be really useful to offer an example of a really good Ignite video screencast, because you'll be, as you can see from the syllabus and from the materials, you guys will be producing one last piece of media. That's your screencast Ignite presentation, which is due on April 27th. So I thought we could watch and discuss a screencast that was produced by Jillian Belanger when she took this class, Digital Authorship, a couple of years ago. I'm kind of happy to share this screencast to you because just a few days ago, Jillian Belanger became an official doctor. That is a PhD in education, as she received her PhD from the University of Rhode Island. I was her major professor, and I was happy to say that she wrote a dissertation about the rhetoric of stand-up comedy. And you may wonder, what does the rhetoric of stand-up comedy have to do with digital authorship? Well, let's watch her EDC 534 screencast to find out, right? So I'm taking you back. I'm sharing my screen back with you. We have another viewing and discussion experience. This time we're going to watch the screencast that Jillian created. We're going to be watching it to think both about its form and its content. So as you watch this video, I'd like you to see if you can pay attention. She's demonstrating synthesis in a way, and we can see evidence of that synthesis through both the form of the screencast and the content. So again, we'll ask you to open up a separate window to view and discuss this 5-minute video. First, we'll all watch it on our own screens, and then we'll come back and we'll have a little bit of conversation about it. So let's do another comprehension check. Thumbs up if you get, we're thinking about form and content in relation to the concept of synthesis. All right, so mute your microphone. We'll watch for another 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Okay, give me a thumbs up when you're done watching that. Okay. All right. So really curious to hear your reaction to this piece. What insight does this piece offer about synthesis, about digital authorship, about form and content, and about the genre of the screencast? What'd you notice? What'd you like? Who wants to go first?
I can go.
Thanks.
Okay. I really liked how she, at first kind of established a purpose for her project and related that to her own personal interests. And then as she was describing her project, she really worked in well the theory behind it. So there was the synthesis portion for it. And then going through her outcomes too, and how I think she talked about how digital text integrates with her personal interests because she's trying to reach a real audience through what she's doing. So I really appreciated how it just was really seamless how she interlaced the theory with what she was trying to accomplish.
Great observation, Kristen. I think that in some ways she really does create a terrific seamless sense of weaving together the ideas from this class, her interest in the rhetoric of comedy, her creative plan, her project plan, right? And oh, by the way, we learn about this show and why she thinks this show has value. Other perspectives on what did you notice about how this screencast was constructed? 20 slides, 20 seconds a slide, 5.5 minutes long. What'd you like about how it was constructed? What'd you notice about the form and the content? What were the weaknesses or limitations of this genre, this format, or this example?
I think the form of it, in particular, the use of imagery. There was not a whole lot of text within it, so she provided that. And as we have all probably heard in creating those kind of visual presentations, allow the pictures to do the talking for you. So I think she did a very good job at doing that.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I noticed how much the pictures were really allowing her to make some metaphorical points. And she even allowed the photos, sometimes even allowed her to display her sense of humor, right? So it kind of got led into her personal identity as well.
Mm-hmm.
What else did you notice about how this piece was constructed?
I tried to follow the scripts on the screen. I found what is shown on the screen does not match with what she said. I don't know if she does that on purpose or what. Because I try to understand.
And so you were watching the transcript from YouTube?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't know whether Jillian uploaded that transcript, and maybe that was her, because if you think about it, she probably wrote a script, but then she performed the oral performance. And what you might be noticing, Hong Yen, is the gap between, she prepared this script, and remember she prepared her slides, she prepared her script, but then she had to perform her performance. So maybe the gap, maybe you're seeing the gap between the script and what she actually said as she did her live performance. So glad you noticed that, Hong Yan. I'm going to go back and take a look at the script and see if that's just a guess. Maybe there's some other reason why there's a disconnect there. But that's to be expected, right? When you are making your screencast, right? You might plan the ideas you're going to develop. You might stick closely to your script, or you might use it as a launching plaid to do something a little bit more extemporaneous. Great observation. Did you anything else about this screencast that you particularly liked, that you noticed, that you valued? Donna.
I liked her conversational style, and there were parts that were very like someone else said, it was very academic, but she made it seem very interesting, even though I'm not a fan of the drunk history program. But she made it seem like this would be a great, like it would be a very interesting topic.
Yeah, she was persuasive, right? She was persuasive, and boy, that persuasion was definitely evident in the passion and energy of her vocal tone, in the pace. That 20 slide thing moves you along, right? And so you can't go too off target in a lot of ways. Dan.
As I understand it, an Ignite presentation or a Pachaka-Cha, I wasn't really focused on it when it first started, and I did get into the flow of where things were going, but in making them and having my students make them for the last 2 years, the narrative hook is the part where the first 4 or 5 slides are supposed to build up a sense of interest. And once that's happened, then you introduce your great big idea around slide 5 or 6. And by that point, you're supposed to have everyone.
Wow, that is a great observation, Dan. I think Jillian did that. I certainly know she started with drunk history and then came back to reveal her project, right?
Yeah.
But thank you for sharing that big insight. That's exactly right. So a Pachaka-Cha screencast Ignite has to grab attention and hook readers. You just can't assume that people are going to be watching it just to watch it. Like you said, maybe as much as 25% of the presentation is going to be that hook to get people deeply to believe in it. So Dan, can you tell us more about how you've been using screencasts with your students and what you notice about it as a form of learning and synthesis for high school students?
Yeah, well, I've done one of this, probably the most strangest of things with it in the sense of I've actually had my students take a chapter of a book and try to make the chapter come alive. And the book is not accessible otherwise. It's a book on clarifying Catholic doctrine. But they end up, I tell them, the whole thing is that they have to use the ideas from Tom Groom up at Boston College. You go from life to faith and back to life again. And so I've done this Pachaka-Cha presentation off the basis of this book for 2 years. And the first year, because this was honor students, they had absolutely no interest on making the introductory slides and establishing the narrative hook, because good honor students just, download content and throw it back at you. And so this year, I wouldn't let them proceed until I knew a narrative hook had been established in each presentation as I went around. So they were much better this year.
Aha! So you had to scaffold. So if I understand you correctly, you had to scaffold your students for the creation of building audience interest, because they were kind of previously trained by other teachers, of course, just to regurgitate. Fascinating. Right. So the quality of the productions went up after you started to help them support that phase that they were struggling with, which was establishing interest.
Right. And the first year, I would just assumed that they would do the narrative hook in 5 slides because I said so. But then I realized I had to go around and be very active in talking about what was the nature of your presentation and how were you not avoiding the directions that I gave you. So.
All right. So give me a thumbs up if you've made a screencast Ignite video, 20 slides, 5 minutes long before. I got some virgins in the class, right? So I got some experienced ones. Notice at least half of us are experienced. So you virgins out there, if you're feeling anxious about this assignment, you just saw 6 of your best friends. I saw Kristen, I saw Mary, I saw Dan, I saw Dan. So you have other folks in this class who you can count on. Plus, of course, by now there's tons of great models online. I showed you just one today, but there's lots and lots of cool models that could inspire you as well. Okay, so now it's 7:30 and we finally have time to do a little bit of progress report. Now, we're getting close to the end of the semester, and that means as you've been doing your multimedia synthesis, you're also thinking a little bit about your final project. Why don't we just go around the room and we'll each share 2 minutes 2 minutes on what you're thinking about now for your final project. Who wants to go first? Mary?
You saw that grin. Well, I'll tell you honestly, I'm going to kind of combine what I did in Julie Coyro's class with this, because I've been tasked with professional development in my district, and in Julie's class, I created an Edmodo course on digital literacy, and like the reading comprehension end of it, where this is going to become more of the authorship part of it, and create some interactive presentations, some interactive tools as well as learning tools for my staff, and hopefully be able to put it out to them so that they can actually do this and get Act 48 credit for it. And if you're not familiar with Edmodo, it's basically a content management system that allows you to integrate PowerPoints, videos, all your resources in one place. And then it actually, since we have a 365 district, it incorporates with it. My teachers will be able to get on exactly with their accounts, and even I can see the analytics of who's actually doing that. I can check the courses that way, and yeah, and see even how long they've been in it, and give them proper credit for it. So, and hopefully continue with that being that agent of change. Hopefully, getting that pedagogical paradigm shift happening.
Nice. So that's actually a great example of it's curation. It's a real project for a real audience. It's building on work you've already done, and it relates directly to your professional expertise. Mm-hmm. Sounds like it has a lot of significance and meaning, a good way to synthesize. Who's got another project, final project that you're thinking about? Neda?
So I've been thinking a lot about my experience trying to introduce digital literacy in classrooms and just what that means in an urban classroom. So I was thinking of making sort of like a how-to video just to sort of help teachers troubleshoot any possible problems before they introduce it into the classroom. So I was thinking about thinking about what might be some possible problems, how to prevent issues, really specific classroom management structures and strategies, just like really practical step-by-step things that teachers should do.
Ah, what a great idea. A kind of how to, and if you do blah, 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 you will avoid blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And this is based on your experience, right? This is coming from your experience of the challenges and the opportunities of being productive. I love this idea, and it's interesting to think about if it were a really simple 3 or 5 minute video. You probably want people to feel like they could take action on some of those things, right? So your goal is to get them to use the strategies you propose.
Right.
Yeah, so the how-to thing, the how-to format makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. Love that idea. What's next? What are you thinking about doing for your final project? James? James?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can. What are you thinking about for your final project, James?
I've definitely been, I'm a messy constructivist, so I'm a little sporadic at the moment, but what was already previously mentioned with Professor Cairo, and I was really influenced by incorporating reading and writing into the classroom, and I want to do kind of like a research paper the more I think about it, using I don't know if it's called TPAC or TPCK, the PDI framework, and try to encompass like an intertextuality in the health and physical education classroom, using the reading, the writing, and the math, because there are metrics involved, in kinesiology, kind of that component. And I have a title, I don't even know who my audience is going to be, but I put physical education and digital technology in educators induction. of how I pretty much want to incorporate some of these frameworks more so for pre-service teachers like myself that never had a long-standing. I've had other careers before this, but now it's interesting on how this is kind of revealing more of a philosophy to me as I'm entering education. And it actually plays more of a role of how I want to choose this type of school I want to actually work at, because of during my research, I noticed there are quite a bit of themes and upcoming, thematics that are used in some of these schools. So, and hopefully I'll be able to implement a program that's in accordance with that kind of their philosophy. So,
cool. So one thing I would invite you to look at is we had a visiting scholar from Brazil. The Media Education Lab had a visiting scholar from Brazil last year, a PhD student from the University of Brasilia in Brazil, who was looking at the relationship between media literacy and sport, right? And he ended up giving a really cool talk to our lab. And if you go to the Media Education Lab YouTube channel, his name is Joe Guimarães, I think, Guimarães. And his framing of the connections between digital literacy and sport and physical education were really fascinating to me. That is an understudied area, so it's true, you're kind of you have a wide canvas there to explore, but there are some scholars, and he is one of them, and I think his work is really interesting. And then just recently, somebody started talking to me about how coaches use video for improving performance, right? Everybody knows that, right? If the football team watches the movie of their football plays before, after the game or whatever. So it is interesting to think about in the context of the TPAC model, where who does media making and why? Right? Because when the coach videotapes the kid's performance in basketball to help them be a better basketball player, the coach is the author and the students are the subject, and the purpose is improving performance. But it is interesting to think about whether or how athletes themselves could be media makers, right? And there's a bunch of interesting controversies going around about that right now as college athletes speak up on their Twitter accounts, and sometimes, sometimes create some challenges for the politics of higher education. So there are so many interesting intersections between digital literacy and sport that it's almost like any path you choose, you're going to have some learning will result. So love that angle. Love to see what you come up with. All right, who's next? Donna, what are you thinking about for your project?
I am thinking about a collaboration with our English department chair. And I have been, as I work on some of these things, sitting at my desk in the main office at the high school. The teachers will walk by and see me playing with Padlet or some of the other things, and they'll say, "Hey, what's that?" And so I get a chance to share with them.
Wow.
But her thought is that I create some sort of like the Ignite presentation, and then demo 10 or 12 tools for them, and then have an informal give and take, and this is how we can use this in our classroom. So that's where I was going with this.
Interesting. So in some ways, your exploration has created curiosity, and now you're feeding the fire of that curiosity that's been created.
Right, and a positive feedback for you and for the class is that one of the teachers, the English teacher, has a class with a lot of students that have ADHD and some other learning differences. And he has switched from Blend Space after talking with me about Padlet, because Blend Space is very linear and the students have to go through one at a time. But with Padlet, it gives them more choice. They can jump from the top to the bottom to the anywhere, and they feel like they have more control, but they're still doing what he wants them to do.
How about that? Isn't that fascinating? Right. So choice and voice.
I thought that was great. So that's kind of going to play into my project too. I thought it was
part of the story that you tell.
Yes.
Love it. Love it. Okay, who's next? Olivia, what are you thinking about for your final project?
I started out knowing that I wanted to do something with collaboration because we have a big push right now for chromes in our rooms. And then with like MCAS being online, we've had a lot of big pushes towards like using different resources. So I've actually brought in things that we've done in class to our teachers as well, which has been really cool. Especially Padlet was one of the biggest ones we talked about. But the more research I've done for collaboration, I found that a lot of it talks about like what to use in classrooms for collaboration. So I think that's the end that I'm going towards, like finding different like resources for teachers, and like they talked about like the wiki spaces, and then podcasts, and like how it can help like all different type of learners. So that's kind of where I've gone for the research.
Cool. So again, then you're curating and collecting some strategies for how to bring those tools into the context of the Chrome rollout in Massachusetts, in York, in where you work and live.
Right. Yes.
Awesome. Okay, that sounds great. Dan Riley, what's your plan? What do you think you might be doing here in the next couple weeks?
No, my plan, as I've talked to you before, is kind of incorporating this digital authorship with civic engagement and service. So what I think I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to create a curriculum that allows students to work with a service organization and kind of create media and different online creations based off that engagement in the service organizations.
Cool. So it's a community outreach through service that'll have a digital authorship component.
Yeah, so my plan is to have some tools already created, and I'm going to use URI as an example, for students to have easy access to find and kind of be able to access those organizations. And then a list of lessons that kind of support them in their progress of, well, what is a active citizen? Why is it important to be an active citizen? And how does it connect to the course that we are in?
Nice. I love that plan. Hong Yan, I know you are doing something having to do with copyright education in an elementary school.
Yeah.
You've done some observations, and tell us about your project.
I have been auditing the class. I didn't do my homework. I feel guilty, but I'm thinking of doing the reflective essay about teaching plagiarism. I want to do, because I have been visited the class, the library, and they are doing a class on teaching how to teach kids about plagiarism, so that they don't copy information. They try to cite the sources and everything. So I'm thinking of maybe I should put my research paper do a class demonstration on how to teach plagiarism for Chinese kids, because we don't have this plagiarism teaching in our syllabus. I mean, in the elementary school, but here I found in the States, people begin to teach plagiarism in the early age. I think that is a very good thing. So I'm thinking I should maybe design this as a class demonstration, so that I have a syllable or class for the kids in China. So that is what I'm thinking about.
I love the idea that you go back with a demonstration lesson on how to teach copyright and plagiarism to third graders, If that is not typically done in China, you will be a sensation. That will make you famous. That's a very important topic. People are going to pay attention to that because that's a cultural shift that's happening right now, right? Norms about plagiarism and copying are becoming more global. So fascinating. Okay, Dan Tucker, what are you thinking about for your final project, my friend?
Well, in some ways, I would say mine kind of mirrors Dan Riley's because I have this scheme in my head that's like a basic theological idea, and I think it kind of can work in terms of media representation and also curation. And so the idea is like, I want to have students to be able to talk about their own lives, say what we'll call my story, the story, which would be like what we learn about in the actual kind of biblical narrative, the church's story, which is something larger than just what's in the scriptures, and then the culture's story where they live. And so to kind of create a mosaic of the four and build bridges between them. So one of them might be like for instance, I want them to be able to say that their own life already has some depth to it. Maybe in talking about how they would like talk to the idea of that's their story, but then the church's story would both be local, a place that they've already been to, they've already tapped into, whether that's the spiritual, like welcoming attitude of our church or their own public library, but some kind of space that they find worthwhile, and whether they have the opportunity or not, some kind of analogous site of pilgrimage or where they'd like to go to branch out. And that could either be a service trip or that could be some kind of pilgrimage to some kind of other religious community that they like to know and understand better.
What I love about this idea is you're inviting them to think about a journey, sort of, right? From inside to outside, from past to present and future, right? And so I definitely see how it's connected to representation, but I also see how what a personal opportunity this is for them to do reflection.
Right. Yes.
To think about that and think about how to represent your reflective thinking. What an interesting assignment challenge, and that should be fun for you to design. Okay, so who haven't I heard from? I think Marie and Kristen. Are you my remaining folks?
I think
What are you thinking about doing for your final project?
I'm thinking something, because there's no computer usage in the kindergarten classroom that I'm in, and the only time that they use the computers is during library time, which is for 40 minutes a day. So I'm trying to figure out a way to incorporate getting ebooks into the classroom to, help further their education, and using apps and, just using technology altogether.
Cool. So you're going to focus on the issues of early childhood media and technology use in the classroom.
In the classroom.
Early childhood. Yeah, it's a great, interesting area. There's not a lot of experts on this. When we talked on the phone earlier this week, we talked about the marvelous Ken Campbell.
Yes.
You haven't met her, E. Little Lit. She's like,
I looked at her website, and also Sue Sabella. I emailed maybe to interview.
Awesome. So I think that looking at the early childhood space for both early literacy and sort of early media literacy is going to be very productive. You're going to have a blast with that. So I know you're working on that, Kristen. And Kristen, or Marie, and Kristen Beatty, you're my last partner in crime here. What are you thinking about for your project?
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and do a research paper. I'm going to look at the future of media literacy education in a high school classroom. And specifically, I think as we talked about, kind of looking at like the obstacles that have plagued the development, I guess, of media lit education so far, and has the trend continued since like the 1990s, and if so, then how can we overcome it? So I think right now I've started by looking at like the need for media literacy education in the high school classroom. So I found a good article by Doug Kellner, and then now I'm looking at some of the obstacles, and so I've been reading some things by Robert Kuby, I think is his name. And then kind of going through like the resources from class, like Buckingham, and just kind of, I'm pulling out a whole bunch of information right now. So.
What's so interesting is that the idea that there's always obstacles, of course, and to any change in education, there's obstacles, but how the obstacles are understood and defined probably have changed over time. Or if they have changed, that'll be an interesting story. If they haven't changed, even that'll be an interesting story, right? Albeit a little depressing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, so to me, it seems like you guys are doing making progress in that creative way. We go back to the beginning of the semester. We remember the 4-stage creative process, right? You feed your head with stuff. You walk away and don't work on it for a while. You come back to it and you have and usually under deadline pressure, you have a flurry of inspiration, and then you test your idea, right? And critique it and refine it. So make sure when you look at the calendar that you leave time for you to do all 4 of those stages, right? Because then that'll make sure that your process is good. At this point, I'd like to see if anybody has any questions about what's coming ahead. What's coming ahead is really just a couple of things. But before I press on to talk about what I want you to do next week, does anybody have any questions about the 2 remaining projects, the Screencast Ignite and the Final Paper Project? Okay, good. If you do have questions, what's the best way to reach me? Twitter, right, Mary? And Marie, you had the same experience. Twitter is the best way to reach me. Okay, so this is the very last reading we're going to be doing for the whole semester.
I have a quick question, actually.
Oh, absolutely.
For the Screen Ignite cast, now that's on a final project, but that is actually a week before the submission of it. So I'm just kind of...
Yeah, so what's the logic of that? Why would the Ignite screencast be due a full week before your actual final paper project? Because students have told me this in the past, you have to think about your screencast almost like a pre-writing project, right? So you will be creating your screencast and figuring out, just like Dan said, how to hook people, what the main ideas are, what the form and the content is. If you do that, if you do that first, actually that makes everything else you do a lot easier because you figure out what your focus is, right? So start with the screencast, and I mean, you'll kind of be working on both simultaneously, but that's the logic behind it. So that means there might be some slippage between your screencast and what you actually turn in. That I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, right? But think of it as part of the creative production process. I'm really glad you asked that question, James, because I think a lot of people wondered, why is it due before, right? And there's a reason for it. It should help your quality of your work and your thinking. What other questions do you have? Okay, so I'm going to go. Oh yeah, Dan, I see you.
Yeah, so that invitation with the phone conversation and so forth, is that 2-week period still open?
Absolutely. And
okay,
in fact,
great.
And in fact, what's really cool about that, and Marie and I had this experience this week, is that, it turns out that within about 15 or 20 minutes, lots of ideas can happen. And then almost just talking it through helps you get clarity.
Right, for sure.
I'm happy to listen to your talking and ask questions, and then usually creates some kind of breakthrough. So and fortunately I'm in the country all week. I'm here, in Rhode Island all week and all next week too. So woohoo. So yeah, absolutely. So ping me anytime, and if you ping me on Twitter, usually we can, you ping me when you have an hour free, and usually we can work it out.
Okay.
Or
right.
As Mary Wallace says, 3 minutes.
3
minutes after she pinged me, we were on the phone, right? So if we're in the same time and space, that's what phone calls require. So that's what we're going to try for. Okay, so let me go back to the share screen, and I'll talk to you a little bit about the last reading that I'd like you to do. And I kind of hate to admit it, but I think I did save the best for last in some ways. What I'd like you to do is watch one short video. It's a video featuring a literary author, Rachel Cohen. And Rachel Cohen is talking about digital authorship. It's just a short 3-minute video. It's from an excerpt of a larger kind of university dialogue. What I'd like you to do is watch it on the video and make a comment, right? Comment on at least one key idea using the video and then I'd like you to choose one of the following readings for next Monday. And after you choose one, you just post a brief reflection on the Google Doc. It's a pretty simple process. So I'm going to try to explain to you. I'm going to make it hard for you to pick which one you want to read. These are all 3 really interesting articles. This one is by Jean Burgess, and it's called Hearing Ordinary Voices, Cultural Studies, Vernacular Creativity, and Digital Storytelling. And this is a really interesting argument about some of the, well, the author says it pretty well in the abstract, that she's addressing some of the discipline's persistent and unresolved tensions around popular culture, cultural agency, and cultural value in the context of digital storytelling. It's a really thought-provoking article, and she is trying, like Nada said, to address some of the real challenges that happen when we do this work in real places, in real schools. I just encountered this article within the last, I don't know, maybe 3 months, and I really love this article. It's by a guy named Robert Petrone, and it was published in a really interesting Journal of Literacy Research linking contemporary research on youth literacy and popular culture in teacher education, right? So it's really looking at what is going on to help pre-service teachers develop digital authorship practices. And it's very thought-provoking. It's beautifully written. It's an interesting piece. And then, of course, some of you were here for Howard Rheingold a couple years ago when he gave the keynote address at the Summer Institute in Digital Literacy. Howard Rheingold is a terrific friend of the University of Rhode Island's Summer Institute in Digital Literacy. And he wrote a really important piece called Using Participatory Media and Public Voice to Encourage Civic Engagement. And I think it's interesting. This is an old piece from 2008, but I thought it would be interesting to revisit it in relation to this whole semester's frou about fake news and how the quality of our media environment is shaping the nature of our public discourse. So I made it really hard for you to pick one of those 3 because all 3 of them are cool. But I do think they serve as 3 strong pieces for us to reflect on as we get to the end of the semester. So anybody have any questions about the work that you're going to be doing for next week? Yeah, it should be fun, right? It should be easy. You're really putting all your effort into the final project, the screencast, and the final project. So have fun with your project, because if you're having fun, you're learning. And if you're learning, then whatever you create, we'll learn from you. So we'll say goodbye now. It's 8:58, and we're going to do this strange growth metaphor. I want you to watch the way the fingers rise from the bottom of the screen until they grow into a full and beautiful flower. Okay, are you ready? Fingers up, girls, boys, everybody. We're bringing the fingers up in the growth model. They're growing, they're growing, they're growing. And see you next week. Bye-bye, guys. Don't get hurt by your flowers. I mean it.